Okay, word of warning. My true crime is intended for adults. We may discuss disturbing cases, so viewer discretion is advised. Thank you. I am working on Arms of the Angel by Diamond Art Club. I am in the UK. I am just a girl in my bedroom who loves diamond painting and is intrigued by true crime. And usually I pick some kind of historic case, whether it was well known or not so well known. But this episode I'm talking about an ongoing case. I am hoping by the time that I get to upload this video we have a verdict, but I have grown very passionate about this case. I am very heavily invested. Yeah, I will go into detail. I am going to talk about everything to do with this case. It's going to be a long one. I'm going to talk about everything. From behind the scenes to the actual crime to the actual court case and hopefully the verdict. This is the case of Ahmaud Arbery. Now I keep messing up his name and it's not fair. Out of respect for not butchering his first name every time I say it, I'm going to call him Arbery. Okay, I can't seem to get it right every time, and I say his name quite a lot. So out of respect, I will call him Arbery. I have got to know this young man very, very well. I have cried for him and his family. He is 25 years old. He is a black man, which upsets me to have to just tell you that, because ultimately that's what this case kind of boils down to. He was fatally shot in Satilla Shores, a neighbourhood near Brunswick in Glenn County in Georgia. This happened on the 23rd of February 2020. So again, not like me, I often do backdated cases, usually not ongoing. Arbery had been pursued by 3 white residents: Travis McMichael, his father Gregory McMichael, who were armed and in one vehicle, and William Roddy Bryan, who was in another vehicle and videoed the pursuit and shooting. After Travis exited his vehicle and wielded a shotgun, Travis and Arbery engaged in a physical confrontation, during which Travis shot Arbery. Police interview transcripts detailed that Gregory initiated the chase after seeing Arbery running past his house. Suspecting that Arbery had just committed a burglary or a theft in Satilla Shores, but no evidence has emerged of Arbery doing any crime whatsoever. According to police testimony, Roddy told police that he saw the chase and joined in independently, but was not sure if Arbery had done anything wrong. Arbery had entered an under construction house with no doors 5 times in the last 5 months, including once shortly before the shooting. But security videos showed that he had not touched or taken anything. Here we go with the backstory and behind the scenes and trying to get these guys arrested or getting it into court or something. The Glynn County Police Department said the Brunswick District Attorney's Office advised them on February 23rd, the day of the shooting, to make no arrests, while the Brunswick District Attorney's Office denied that they ever gave such advice. Then Waycross District Attorney George Barnhill advised twice that Glynn County Police Department make no arrests, once on February 24th, the next day, and this was before he was even assigned the case. A second time on April the 2nd, he's got this case now. He was given it on February 27th. So it's his case now. On April the 2nd, he announced his intention to recuse himself from the case due to his connections between his son and Gregory McMichael. He requested this recusal on April the 7th. So he's denied them twice, once before it's even his, once when it is his, and oops, I know these people, so I'm going to now pass this case on, and it was transferred to the Cobb County District Attorney's Office, and it was the 4th Prosecutor's Office to handle this case. Gregory McMichael gave a copy of the video of the shooting to his attorney, who then gave it to a local radio station, WGIG, who posted it to their website on May the 5th. The video went viral, also having been posted on YouTube and Twitter. Within hours, District Attorney Tom Durden said a grand jury would decide whether charges would be brought, and accepted an offer from Governor Brian Kemp to have the Georgia Bureau of Investigation investigate the case. The GBI, as I will call them, Georgia Bureau Investigation. The GBI arrested the McMichaels on May the 7th and Roddy on May 21st, charging them with felony murder and other crimes. On June the 4th, additional evidence was presented by the prosecutor to support the murder charges, including a statement to the GBI by Roddy that Travis McMichael said, quote, effing N-word, as Arbery lay dying. A grand jury subsequently indicted each of the 3 men on charges of malice murder, felony murder, 4 counts, aggravated assault, 2 counts, false imprisonment, and criminal attempt to commit false imprisonment. In April 2021, all 3 men were indicted on federal charges of 1 count each of interference with rights. In layman terms, this is a hate crime. 1 count each of attempted kidnapping. And the McMichaels were also charged with separate counts of using firearms during a crime of violence. The fact that the McMichaels were not arrested until 74 days after the killing, after the video went viral, sparked debates on racial profiling in the United States. Numerous religious leaders, politicians, athletes, and other celebrities condemned the incident. The Glynn County Police Department and the Brunswick District Attorney's Office were nationally criticised for their handling of this case and the delayed arrests. Georgia Attorney General Christopher Carr formally requested the intervention of the FBI in this case on May the 10th, which was granted the following day. There is a video out there that you can easily find if you want to. I'm not putting it on my channel. I'm too passionate, and he wanted it to go viral. I'm not helping that cause. It's very tragic, but I will talk to you about it. It was filmed by Roddy using his cell phone from his vehicle as he followed Arbery jogging down the neighbourhood road. Okay, so I will talk about this to the best of my ability. The video showed Arbery jogging on the left side of the road when he encountered a white pickup truck that had stopped in the right lane. Gregory McMichael is standing in the truck bed, while Travis initially stands beside the driver door with a shotgun. Roddy's vehicle comes to a stop behind Arbery and the pickup truck. As Arbery approaches the pickup truck, shouting can be heard. Arbery then crosses from the left side of the road to the right side and runs around the passenger side of the truck. After passing the truck's front, Arbery turns left. Meanwhile, Travis, holding his shotgun, approaches Arbery at the truck's front. Now, at this point, the camera's view of the confrontation between Arbery and Travis is blocked for... The whole video is not very long. I think it's like a minute and a half, but it's blocked momentarily. You can't see. Now, I have seen this video more times, and they've slowed it down and speeded it up and everything. From my interpretation of what happened is that when Arbery ran round the front of the truck, you heard a shot. Okay, so some media have said that the first gunshot seems to be heard before they struggle with each other, which I kind of agree with. Other media accounts first report a struggle, then a gunshot. And then some say, oh, you can't tell. Just from my opinion, my untrained eye, I see Arbery run round and Travis kind of go to meet him, and you can hear the gunshot. Okay? But let's... because it's blocked and we can't see how the men first engage with each other. So, yeah. Okay, so then Travis and Arbery are seen to grapple over the shotgun. While struggling, both men disappear off camera view on the left side, after which the audio of a second gunshot is heard. Then they reappear, and Arbery throws punches and tries to grab the shotgun. A third gunshot is heard being fired by Travis at point blank range as Arbery appears to throw a right-handed punch. Arbery recoils, stumbles, and collapses face down in the middle of the road while Travis walks away. Gregory McMichael, who has taken out a handgun but has not fired, runs towards his son and Arbery. But that's the bit that gets me, is when he stumbled. It's as if his brain's saying still run, and he just physically can't. I'm sorry, I'm just very invested. Okay, let's talk about the investigation by Glynn County Police. Prior thefts and trespassing incidences were reported in December 2019 and January 2020. Residents of Satilla Shores reported 3 break-ins or thefts. On December 8, 2019, a Satilla Shores resident reported rifles stolen from the resident's unlocked car. Police recorded a theft on December 28, 2019 and on January 1st, 2020. Travis McMichael filed a report of a firearm stolen from his unlocked truck. On the 11th of February 2020, Travis called 911 to report a slender 6-foot-tall black man with short hair wearing red shorts and a white t-shirt who was trespassing on the site of a house under construction. Travis said, quote, "I've never seen this guy before in the neighbourhood," end quote. The dispatcher asked whether Travis was okay, and he said, quote, "Yeah, it just startled me. When I turned around and saw him and backed up, he reached into his pocket and ran into the house. So I don't know if he's armed or not, but he looked like he was acting like he was. We've been having a lot of burglaries and break-ins around here lately," end quote. He told the dispatcher that he was out of his truck and that as many as 4 neighbours were out looking for the man. His father Gregory was one of them people out searching that night, and Gregory and at least one other neighbour were armed. Police responded and searched the house along with a neighbour but found no one. However, surveillance video from that evening showed a man who reportedly looked like Arbery briefly walking in and out of the house under construction. He did not take anything. The under construction house did not have doors or windows. No evidence has emerged of Arbery committing burglaries or thefts in Satilla Shores. On February 23rd, in the minutes before the shooting, a security camera installed on the residence across the street from the house under construction recorded a man identified by his family as Arbery walking down the road and into the house. A second security camera installed within the house recorded a man identified as Arbery by his family looking at the interior of the house. Approximately 5 minutes later, he left and resumed jogging down the street. After the man left the house, the first camera on the residence across the street showed a white pickup truck heading in the man's direction, followed a few minutes later by 2 police cars. 2 calls to the Glen Brunswick 911 dispatcher were made just before the shooting. In the first, a then unidentified male caller said another man was in a house that was under construction. The 911 dispatcher asked if the man was, quote, "breaking into it right now," end quote. The caller replied, quote, "No, it's all open," end quote. After the caller said the man was now, quote, "running down the street," end quote, the dispatcher said police would respond. The dispatcher asked at 1:08 p.m, quote, "I just need to know what he's doing wrong. Was he just on the premises and not supposed to be?" End quote. The caller responded with some parts garbled, saying, quote, "And he's been caught on camera a bunch at night," it's kind of an ongoing thing. The caller identified the man as, quote, black guy, white t-shirt, end quote. The first caller was later identified in court as neighbour Matthew Albenzi. In the second call, beginning at 1:14 p.m, a male caller said, quote, I'm out here at Satilla Shores. There's a black male running down the street, end quote. The 911 dispatcher asked, quote, where at Satilla Shores? The caller replied, I don't know what street we're on, end quote. The caller shouted, quote, stop, watch that, stop, damn it, stop, end quote. The dispatcher tried to speak to the caller but did not receive a reply for several minutes. The caller later hung up. The second caller was later identified in court as Gregory McMichael. The Glynn County Police Department reached the scene immediately after the fatal shooting. The responding officer's report relied almost entirely on an interview with Gregory McMichael, who was described as a witness. Gregory said he was in his yard when he saw an unidentified man running by. He said he recognised the man from a prior incident, quote, the other night, when he said he saw the man reach into his pants as if for a weapon. He called to his son, Travis, and said, quote, the guy is running down the street, let's go, end quote. Gregory bought a .357 Magnum revolver, while Travis bought a shotgun in their pickup truck. The McMichaels said they pursued the man because he resembled a suspect in a string of local burglaries. But the police said there had only been one recent theft from an unlocked car in the neighbourhood. Travis attempted to cut off the man with his truck. The man turned and began, quote, running back in the direction from which he came, end quote. The report states a third person, who was identified as Roddy, also tried to cut off the man but failed. Gregory said he saw the unidentified man and yelled, stop, stop, we want to talk to you, and that they pulled up next to the man, with Travis exiting the truck with the shotgun in hand. Gregory claimed the man, quote, began to violently attack Travis, end quote, before 2 shots were fired. The man died at the scene after bleeding out. The report concluded. Authorities later identified that man as Ahmaud Arbery. The autopsy report released by the GBI, Georgia Bureau of Investigations, ruled Arbery's death was a homicide and that it was caused by 3 gunshot wounds he sustained, quote, during a struggle for the shotgun, end quote, that fired those shots. 1 gunshot wounded the upper left chest, 1 gunshot wounded the lower middle chest, and 1 gunshot caused a deep gaping graze wound to the right wrist. There were no alcohol or drugs in Arbery's body other than a, quote, tiny amount of THC, the psychoactive component of cannabis. The case started under the jurisdiction of Brunswick District Attorney Jackie Johnson. Because Gregory McMichael had previously worked as an investigator in her office, she recused herself from further involvement in the case. On February 27, 2020, the case was transferred by the Georgia Attorney General's Office to Waycross District Attorney's Office. On March the 8th, two Glynn County Commissioners, citing discussions with the Glynn County Police, accused Jackie Johnson or her office of preventing the McMichaels' immediate arrest. Commissioner Alan Booker said, quote, "The police at the scene went to her saying they were ready to arrest both of them. These were the police at the scene who had done the investigation. She shut them down to protect her friend, Gregory McMichael," end quote. Commissioner Peter Murphy said the officers who responded at the scene had concluded that there was probable cause to make an arrest, but when they contacted Jackie Johnson's office, they, quote, "were told not to make the arrest," end quote. Of course, Johnson's office said that Johnson did not, quote, "have any conversation with any Glynn County Police Department officer about this case," end quote, on February 23rd, and that, quote, "no assistant district attorney in the office directed any Glynn County police officer not to make an arrest," end quote. Jackie Johnson's office also blamed the Glynn County Police Department for being, quote, "unable to make a probable cause determination on its own," end quote. Side note, they already had made that decision, and argued that it was the local police's responsibility, not the district attorney's responsibility, to make arrests. It is common for police to consult with the district attorney's office in the aftermath of a homicide or other complex cases. Just putting that out there. On the 9th of May, the Glynn County Police Department said that on February 23rd, the Brunswick District Attorney's Office, quote, "became involved in the investigation. The McMichaels were deemed not to be a flight risk, and officers were advised that no arrests were necessary at the time," end quote. The local police also said that on February 24, Waycross District Attorney George Barnhill told them that the killing of Arbery, quote, "was justifiable homicide." Shocking. On 2nd of September 2021, Jackie Johnson, who was not re-elected as district attorney, was indicted by the Glynn County Grand Jury. The grand jury charging her with 1. obstruction of a police officer, a misdemeanor for allegedly telling 2 Glynn County police officers not to arrest Travis McMichael after he shot and killed Arbery, and 2. violating her oath of office, a felony, for allegedly, quote, "showing favour and affection," end quote, to Gregory McMichael, who had previously worked as an investigator for the DA's office, and allegedly failing, quote, "to treat Ahmaud Arbery and his family fairly and with dignity," end quote. The indictment followed a Georgia Bureau of investigation requested in May 2020 by Georgia Attorney General Chris Carr into potential misconduct during the investigation into Arbery's death. Just a side note and an opinion thrown in here. I'm glad, actually, because it's not all about race. It's about aligning yourself with murderers, in my opinion. Yeah, I'm glad that she got pulled up and actually indicted over her actions, and so she should. Just because she was a DA, why would that make a slight bit of difference? Okay, so Waycross, DA George Barnhill gave Glynn County Police, quote, an initial opinion on the day after the shooting on February 24, according to a memorandum written by Barnhill to Glynn County Police on April the 2nd. Barnhill wrote, quote, the autopsy supports the initial opinion we gave you on February 24 at a briefing room in the Glynn County Police Department. After reviewing the evidence you had at the time, we did not see grounds for an arrest of any of the three parties, end quote. But according to the Office of the Georgia Attorney General on May 10, Barnhill had not yet been appointed to handle Arbery's case on February 24, and he had not put in a request to handle the case. So he's butting in again without actually taking on the case. The Georgia Attorney General's office on May 10th identified the following events as having happened on February 27. The Georgia Attorney General's office received the request from Jackie Johnson's office to transfer Arbery's case to another prosecutor. On the same day, the Georgia Attorney General's office appointed Barnhill as the presiding prosecutor. Neither Jackie Johnson or George Barnhill informed the Georgia Attorney General's office that Barnhill had already actively participated in the reviewing of the evidence and given his opinion on whether arrests should occur. I hope you're following this. I know it's complicated, but I'm hoping it makes sense. On the 1st of April, Arbery's autopsy report was given to George Barnhill. On the 2nd of April, he wrote that memorandum to the Glynn County Police recommending that no arrests be made. He also wrote that the McMichaels were within their rights to chase, quote, a burglary suspect with solid first-hand probable cause, end quote. Also that, quote, Arbery initiated the fight, and that Travis McMichael, quote, was allowed to use deadly force to protect himself when Arbery grabbed the shotgun. We're going to get into this as we proceed, and if you have not heard of this case, you can hear already on bias. I don't mean to be, because I'm telling you this case, but we will get into all of that as we move forward. Barnhill cited Georgia's citizens' arrest law, dating to the Civil War era, as justifying the killing of Arbery. Side note, the Georgia law, and trust me, I've been sat in the courtroom, not physically, obviously, I'm in the UK, but I've been sat in that courtroom and I have a good understanding of what a citizen's arrest is. And it is a crime that must be committed within the citizen's immediate knowledge, or there must be reasonable grounds and probable grounds of suspicion for a felony. Now, this means you have to witness it in some form or other. So just as a side note, and the state or the prosecutor gave a perfect example of what this is to the jury. And she said that when a man is in his booth in a supermarket and he's looking at all the cameras and he sees someone shoplifting, he has immediate knowledge, even though he wasn't directly beside her seeing her do it. So they had no idea what he was doing. He ran past their house and then pursued him under the presumption that he had committed some crime or other. Okay, back to it. Barnhill alleged that the videos of Arbery entering the home under construction on the day of the shooting showed Arbery, quote, burglarizing a home immediately preceding the chase and confrontation, end quote. Except the McMichaels didn't know that he had been in that house. So explain that to me. The attorneys representing the Arbery family responded, quote, "This video is consistent with the evidence already known to us. Ahmaud Arbery was out for a jog. He stopped by a property under construction where he engaged in no illegal activity and remained for only a brief period. Ahmaud didn't take anything from the construction site. He did not cause any damage to the property. He remained for a brief period of time and was not instructed by anyone to leave, but rather left on his own accord to continue his jog. Arbery's actions at this empty home under construction were in no way a felony under Georgia law. This video confirms Mr. Arbery's murder was not justified, meaning the actions of the men who pursued him and ambushed him were unjustified." End quote. Now let's talk about the owner of this home. Okay, he was 90 miles away at the time of the shooting. He later said, quote, "I've never had a police report on my property or anything stolen from my property or any kind of robbery," end quote. Barnhill wrote that, quote, "Arbery's mental health and prior convictions help explain his apparent aggressive nature and his possible thought pattern to attack an armed man," end quote. Lastly, Barnhill, who has no permission in any of this, but he's not even linked to this case yet, Barnhill informed the Glynn County Police that he was going to recuse from the case due to connections between his son and Gregory McMichael. On April 7, Barnhill wrote to Georgia's Attorney General Christopher Carr saying Arbery's, quote, "family are not strangers to the local criminal justice system," noting that Arbery's brother and cousins had encounters with the law. Barnhill told Carr that there was, quote, "video of Arbery burglarizing a home immediately preceding the chase and confrontation," end quote. The Georgia Attorney General's office on May 10 said the following events happened on April 7. It received a request from Barnhill's office to transfer the Arbery case to another prosecutor, and Barnhill revealed that he had learned, quote, "about 3 or 4 weeks ago," end quote, that Arbery had been previously prosecuted by his son, a prosecutor for the Brunswick District Attorney's Office in an earlier case. He also said that one of the defendants had served as an investigator on the same prosecution. This was Gregory McMichael, who was employed at the Brunswick DA's office. The request did not explain why Barnhill had delayed in recusing his office from the case, did not mention that Barnhill had advised Glynn County Police on April the 2nd to make no arrests, and didn't say Barnhill's involvement on the 24th, instead recounting only his involvement, quote, "upon taking the case," end quote. Wrong. On the 13th of April, after he has recused himself, he's now out, he's done, he's finished. The Georgia Attorney General's office appointed Atlantic District Attorney Tom Durden to take over the handling of the case. As I said earlier, a video of the shooting was uploaded on May the 5th on the website of a local radio station, WGIG. It was received from Gregory McMichael. After 2 hours, the WGIG removed the video for being too graphic. I mean, why they would have watched it first and seen a shooting, but okay. The video was uploaded to YouTube that day. The Arbery family's attorney posted a 28-second segment of the video on Twitter. The video of the shooting went viral. Glynn County Police requested that the Georgia Bureau of Investigation look into how the video was publicised. The Guardian published an edited version of the video on May 6. TMZ published a longer version of the video on May 5th. On May the 7th, Alan David Tucker, a local criminal defence attorney, said that he had sent the cell phone video to WGIG and that it had been recorded by Roddy, who was in the second truck following Arbery. WGIG confirmed that Tucker had provided the video to the radio station. Tucker had informally consulted with the suspects in the case, but said that he had not been retained to represent anyone involved. Tucker said that he released the video to provide, quote, absolute transparency due to accusations and assumptions, end quote, and that, quote, my purpose was not to exonerate them or convict them, end quote. Within hours of the video becoming public, Tom Durden, the now DA that is now taking that case on, said that he would present the case in the next available grand jury in Glynn County to decide if charges should be filed. The convening of grand juries had been postponed until the 12th of June due to what we all now know as the pandemic. Durden accepted Georgia Governor Brian Kemp's offer to bring in the Georgia Bureau of Investigation to investigate. This guy means business and we are on a roll. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation found probable cause to charge Gregory and Travis McMichael within 36 hours of taking over jurisdiction of the case, and on the 7th of May arrested and charged them with felony murder. The McMichaels were booked into Glynn County Jail. Yay! At an appearance before a judge the following day, the McMichaels were both denied bond. Given the, quote, size and magnitude, end quote, of the investigation, Durden requested that the case be reassigned to another prosecutor with a larger staff. On May the 11th, this is in a matter of days, not months like previously, Durden asked Georgia Attorney General's office. He can't cope because this is just too big for him, and all credit to him for handing it over. On May the 11th, the Cobb County District Attorney's Office, led by Juliette Holmes, she was the fourth DA to take over the case, but we are now with Cobb County DA's office. Arbery's family welcomed that transfer, and I think fresh eyes and everything else, yay. Okay, so on the 21st of May 2020, Roddy was charged with felony murder and attempt to commit false imprisonment. According to the arrest warrant, Roddy tried to, quote, confine and detain, end quote, Arbery without legal authority by, quote, utilising his vehicle on multiple occasions, end quote, before Arbery was shot. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation said their investigators found, quote, a number of pieces of video, end quote, that linked Roddy to the case. Roddy was alleged to have attempted to block Arbery, which was unsuccessful, and struck Arbery with his pickup truck while chasing him. Arbery's palm print was found on the rear door of his truck. Cotton fibres near the truck bed were attributed to contact with Mr. Arbery, and a dent was found below the location of the cotton fibres. He physically hit him with his car. At the June 4, 2020 preliminary hearing, a Glynn County Magistrate Court judge ruled that there was probable cause for the murder charges against all three men. The prosecution presented additional evidence to the court to support the murder charges, including hours of testimony from the lead Georgia Bureau of Investigations investigator. At the hearing, the prosecutor said that the three men, quote, chased, hunted down, and ultimately executed Arbery, end quote. The investigator testified that none of the three had called 911 prior to the chase. He said, I don't believe it was self-defense by Mr. McMichael. I believe it was self-defense by Mr. Arbery. I believe Mr. Arbery was being pursued, and he ran until he couldn't run anymore. And it was turn his back to a man with a shotgun, or fight with his bare hands against a man with a shotgun, and he chose to fight. Going back to the quote that Travis said, which I will not repeat, but basically the racial slur, he said that while he was stood over him having been shot. Roddy is talking to the GBI, and he gave testimony that Travis McMichael had previously used the slur on previous occasions in social media postings and in text messages. The alleged use of a racial slur could affect a federal investigation of whether a hate crime charge could be brought. There was body cam footage from the police officer that turned up at the scene of Mr. Arbery's killing, because that's what it was. And it showed that the McMichael's truck had a Confederate flag sticker on its toolbox. I'm just putting that out there. They didn't really talk about that in court, but we know where we're going with this. On June 24, 2020, a Glynn County grand jury indictment was released against all three defendants, each on 9 counts. And just to refresh your memory, malice murder, 4 counts of felony murder, 2 counts of aggravated assault, false imprisonment, and criminal attempt to commit false imprisonment. At a hearing on July 2020, the 3 defendants waived arraignment and pleaded, what do you reckon? Not guilty. During the hearing, the lead prosecutor disclosed that Arbery's palm print had been found on the side of Roddy's truck, and texts taken from Roddy's cell phone were covered with racist remarks. At the conclusion of the hearing, the judge denied bond to Roddy. In August 2020, attorneys for the McMichaels and Roddy filed motions seeking release on bond and dismissal of the charges. In November 2020, the court denied the McMichaels' request for bond. Okay, so I want to get into the pre-trial rulings now. These are what the judge decides can and cannot be talked about in court. People gathered outside the courthouse on November 10, 2021. The trial judge, Timothy Walmsley, made the following pre-trial rulings in 2021. He denied a prosecution motion to bar testimony that the neighbourhood was, quote, on edge at the time of the killing, meaning criminal activity. He ruled that the defence could not introduce evidence of Arbery's prior, quote, bad acts, noting that the McMichaels were unaware of Arbery's past at the time of the killing. He justified his ruling by stating that, quote, the character of the victim is neither relevant nor admissible in a murder trial, end quote, and that such evidence might also mislead the jury into thinking that Arbery's killing was, quote, somehow justified on potential future dangerousness, end quote. He ruled that the defence could not introduce Arbery's mental health records as evidence, citing Arbery's medical privacy. The judge also stated that a nurse's 2018 diagnosis of Arbery's having mental illness was, quote, highly questionable and may unfairly prejudice the jury. He ruled that the prosecution could let the jury listen to recorded phone calls made from the jailed McMichaels and issued a limited gag order on trial lawyers not to comment on inadmissible evidence, including evidence they, quote, should reasonably know, end quote, would be ruled as inadmissible at trial. He excluded evidence of the minute amounts of THC detected in Arbery's body after his death, excluded testimony of two use of force experts which the defence wanted to use regarding Travis McMichael's Coast Guard training, and excluded the introduction of graphic footage of a dying Arbery. He excluded evidence that Arbery was on probation when he was killed, but allowed the introduction into evidence of photos and videos of a Confederate flag symbol on the truck. The trial of the McMichaels and Roddy in the Superior Court before Judge Walmsley began on October 18, 2021, with jury selection. This process was lengthy and proceeding slowly, with 600 potential jurors, each questioned on what they had heard about the case and whether they had formed a belief about the guilt or innocence of the defendant, with many prospective jurors being dismissed. During jury selection, links were taken off the court's website where potential jurors could access them. The judge denied a defence motion to limit demonstrations near the courthouse, citing the demonstrators' First Amendment rights. The judge, however, expressed concern about social media posts that were, quote, identifying jurors or attempting to influence the public, end quote. On November the 3rd, 2021, jury selection was complete. 12 jurors and 4 alternatives were selected. Of the 16 members, 1 was a black man, 3 were white men, and 12 were white women. The defence struck 11 of 12 prospective black jurors, the defence leaving the 1 black man from the qualified panel, while the prosecution used all 12 of its allotted strikes on white potential jurors. Judge Walmsley rejected a prosecution motion alleging that the defence had used its strikes in a racially discriminatory way. As of July 2019, Glynn County was 26% African American. Opening statements for the state and the McMichaels were made on November 5th, 2021. Opening statements for Roddy were delivered on November the 18th, 2021, after the prosecution rested its case. Prosecutor Linda, please forgive me if I say this wrong, Linda Danakowski said the killing of Arbery arose from the defendant's, quote, assumptions and driveway decisions, not on facts, not on evidence, end quote. She stated that the defendants did not have, quote, immediate knowledge, end quote, of Arbery committing a crime that day, referencing Greg McMichael's police statement where he said he did not know if Arbery had committed a break-in. She also highlighted that 12 days before the killing, Glynn County police officer Robert Rash had relayed to the McMichaels a statement from the under-construction house owner that Arbery, quote, has never stolen or taken anything from his property, end quote. Linda described that Arbery was, quote, under attack, end quote, by the defendants during the chase on the day of the killing, alleging that Roddy had attempted to hit Arbery with his truck 4 times, that Greg McMichael told Arbery, quote, stop or I'll blow your head off, end quote. That Greg later described Arbery as, quote, trapped like a rat, end quote, as a result of the chase, and that Travis McMichael had, quote, stepped around that open door and moved toward, end quote, Arbery during that final confrontation. Bob Rubin, the lawyer for Travis McMichael, stated that although there was, quote, no crime committed, end quote, in his presence, quote, there was probable cause to believe a felony had been committed, end quote, by Arbery, and that he was, quote, attempting to escape, end quote. Rubin described the Satilla Shores neighbourhood as on edge due to the property crimes, arguing that Travis had a, quote, duty and responsibility to protect himself and his neighbourhood, end quote. Rubin stated that Travis killed Arbery, quote, in self-defence, end quote, because if Arbery took Travis's gun, either Travis or Greg would be dead. Frank Hogue, the lawyer for Greg McMichael, stated that Greg correctly recognised Arbery from prior videos of Arbery entering the under construction house, and that, quote, Greg had sound reasons to believe theft had occurred, burglary, end quote. Kevin Goff, the lawyer for Roddy, stated that he had, quote, no intent to strike or injure, end quote, Arbery, while noting that Roddy had not taken his rifle along for the chase. Goff argued that there is, quote, scant evidence, end quote, that Roddy attempted to, quote, conceal or minimise his involvement, end quote, in the incident. Because Roddy did not dispose of the hand phone video of the chase and shooting. Instead, he passed the video on to the police. The prosecution presented evidence from November 5th to November 16th, 2021. Law enforcement Robert Rash. A Glynn County police officer testified, 1. After speaking to Larry English, the owner of the under construction house, Rash had been searching for Arbery to warn him against trespassing. 2. Having known Greg Michael professionally, Rash in December 2020 discussed the, quote, unidentified black male, end quote, with Greg. At Greg's suggestion, Rash shared Greg's hand phone with English because Rash wanted Greg to be, quote, an expert witness to be on the phone with 911, end quote, to help identify Arbery. 3. Rash never deputised Greg or gave him any authority. 4. Rash later shared security camera videos of Arbery with the McMichaels 12 days before the killing, while telling the McMichaels that Larry English, quote, hasn't seen him actually take anything, end quote. 5. Also, at the time, Rash told the McMichaels about a gun theft incident, quote, down the road that did not involve Arbery. Quote, we got on video the car that people came in and stole them. They were from another neighbourhood, end quote. Ricky Minshew, who was a Glynn County police officer at the time of the killing, testified he was seconds away from the scene at the time of the shots, having responded to a non-emergency report about a, quote, suspicious black male leaving a home under construction. Minshew said he arrived at the scene seeing Arbery in a pool of blood and heard a, quote, death rattle from Arbery, but did not render medical attention as he did not have, quote, adequate medical training, end quote, to handle such a serious injury, and also because there were no, quote, police units to watch my back, end quote, when he arrived. Minshew testified that he questioned Roddy at the scene, where Roddy said the following. 1. That he was not familiar with Arbery or the McMichaels when Roddy joined in the chase. 2. That he was not sure if Arbery did anything wrong. 3. That he did not know if he should have chased Arbery at all. 4. That he tried to, quote, corner Arbery with his vehicle 5 times. 5. That Arbery, quote, had to stop and catch his breath, end quote, and seemed, quote, tired of running, end quote. 6. That he heard one of the McMichaels shouting at Arbery, what did you steal? What did you do? During the chase. William Duggan, a Glynn County police officer, testified that when he came to the scene after hearing, quote, shots fired report on his radio, the jury was shown Duggan's body cam and dashboard camera footage, which included graphic video of Arbery's body. Duggan said he had attended to Arbery intending to stop the bleeding from a large chest wound, but then realised that Arbery had already passed. Duggan said that he saw Travis McMichael covered in blood and asked if Travis was okay, to which Travis replied, quote, no, I'm not okay. I just effing killed somebody, end quote. Duggan described Travis as very upset and cooperative. Jeff Branderberry, a Glynn County police officer, testified that he interviewed Greg McMichael at the scene, who was, quote, pretty amped up, a little upset, end quote. He recounted Greg saying the following. 1. That he had seen Arbery, quote, hauling arse down the street, end quote, past his house in a, quote, dead run. 2. That Arbery had been, quote, breaking in all these houses out here. He makes frequent trips to the neighbourhood and gets caught on video cameras every third or fourth night breaking into places, and no one's been able to catch him, end quote. That, quote, a driving force in my mind is my son had a missing pistol, and this guy, I don't know for a fact this guy, had been going over doing this crap over and over. I saw him. If I could have gotten a shot, I would have shot him myself, end quote. That the blood on Greg's hand came from checking if Arbery had a gun. 5. That Arbery was, quote, an arsehole. He was hooked up when he came around the corner, end quote. Roderick Nohilly, a Glynn County police detective who had previously known Greg McMichael professionally, interviewed Greg at the police station later in the day of the killing. Nohilly testified that Greg told him, 1, quote, I don't know, he might have, end quote, in response to his question on whether Arbery broke into that house that day. 2, he saw Arbery, quote, hauling arse past his house, quote, getting the hell out of there, end quote, prompting him to take his handgun and call for Travis. 3, that they, quote, chased Arbery around the neighbourhood for a bit, but he wasn't winded at all, end quote. That Arbery was, quote, trapped like a rat in the chase, wanting to flee, but realised he was not going to get away, end quote. 5, that Arbery wanted to, quote, grab Travis's gun and probably shoot Travis. If he'd have gotten that shotgun and there was no separation between Travis and him, I was going to cap his ass, end quote. Stephen Lowry, formerly a Glynn Detective Police investigator who worked on the case, had interviewed Roddy at the police station later in the day of the killing. Lowry testified that Roddy told him, 1, that he had seen Arbery, quote, running down the road, end quote, with a truck following. So Roddy entered his own vehicle to, quote, assist. 2, that he had not seen Arbery before and did not know if Arbery was involved with, quote, any past instances. 3, that during the chase he tried to cut off Arbery multiple times, angled Arbery, quote, off the side of the road, end quote, but didn't hit him. 4, that Arbery was trying to open Roddy's truck door during the chase. Larry further testified that Arbery's fingerprints were found on Roddy's truck door next to a dent in the truck's body. Regarding the status of the Glynn County investigation before the GBI takeover, Larry said that it could have been described as, quote, inactive. Jason Seacrest, a Georgia Bureau of Investigation agent who interviewed Roddy in May 2020, testified that 1, Roddy said he, quote, didn't know for sure, end quote, if Arbery did something wrong, but, quote, instinct indicated Arbery did, and Roddy ultimately, quote, figured he stole something, end quote. Compared to his earlier interviews, Roddy played down his involvement in the chase in the later interview, stating that he wanted to slow Arbery down and take a picture of Arbery to identify him to the police. Richard Dial, a Georgia Bureau of Investigation agent, led the organisation's investigation into Arbery's killing. Side note, he was awesome. He was not being bullied by that defence. Okay, so Dial testified. 1. Roddy's behaviour was not that of a, quote, witness, as he was, quote, pursuing Arbery and, quote, trying to box him between the two different vehicles. During the chase, Roddy had to reverse his vehicle to continue his pursuit of Arbery after Arbery turned into another street and Roddy overshot the turn. Maps compiled by the GBI showed that the McMichaels vehicle looped around to the other end of the street Arbery was on, such that Arbery was between Roddy and the McMichaels with no way to leave the street without meeting one of their vehicles. Another GBI investigator was Lawrence Kelly, who testified. He analysed the phone records and concluded that Roddy did not communicate with the McMichaels on the day of the shooting or before. Jesse Worley, who said that Arbery's fingerprints were found on Roddy's truck. Ann Kistler said that fibres from the side of Roddy's truck were consistent with those of Arbery's shirt. Brian Leopard, who said that Travis's shotgun was fired very close to Arbery's armpit, close enough to touch Arbery's shirt, and close enough for Arbery to possibly grab. During testimony by Cara Richardson, the director of the Glynn Brunswick 911 call centre, several calls were played for the jury to hear. In July 2019, Greg McMichael reported, quote, a lot of break-ins in the area, car break-ins, and my son and I just discovered a male suspect. He may be living under Bluff Creek Bridge. We just made contact with him. Other calls made by Travis in January 2020 and mid-February 2020 were also played, as well as a call by Gregory McMichael at the time of the incident. Security camera videos showed the jury that Arbery had visited Larry English's under-construction house 5 times between October 2019 to February 2020. The video showed that Arbery had no bag and he did not touch or take anything from that house. The jury also saw more security camera footage from the house, displaying other incidents of 2 white boys taking plywood from the property's garage, and separately a white man and woman entering the house at night with a small bag. English made multiple 911 calls regarding the white couple, once saying, quote, I know that first time they went in and stole, end quote, from the boat at his property. He also called 911 over Arbery in 2019, describing him as a, quote, trespasser. Citing ill health, English did not testify live in court, but instead a September 2021 video deposition of his was shown to the jury. English testified in his deposition that 1. People frequently explored his under-construction house. 2. He called 911 on Arbery in 2019, wanting the police to tell Arbery quote, not to be there anymore, end quote. He barely knew the McMichaels and had never met Roddy. As to whether he told the McMichaels about incidences at his house, probably, but not sure. He had not authorised the McMichaels to confront anyone on his property, and he did not authorise a different neighbour, not Roddy, to check his property. Kelly Parr, whose parents resided at Satilla Shores, testified that in either December 2019 or January 2020, she saw a man at the under construction house, whom now she believes to be Arbery. She said that the man, quote, was just standing in the door frame and we just kind of looked at each other as I drove by, end quote. And that the man, quote, didn't hide or anything, end quote. Matthew Albenzi, a Satilla Shores resident, testified that 1. He saw Arbery, quote, just looking around, end quote, inside the under construction house on the day of the killing. 2. In reaction to that, he put a handgun in his pocket and called the police non-emergency number from across the street. 3. He chose not to call 911 because he, quote, did not see an emergency, end quote. 4. That Arbery ran off during Albenzi's call, to which Albenzi said, quote, I don't know why he took off running. I don't know if he saw me or not, end quote. Albenzi's call was played to the jury. Dr. Edmund Donahue, the state medical examiner who conducted Arbery's autopsy, testified that both the first and third blasts resulted in fatal injuries in Arbery, such that police or paramedics would not have been able to save his life. The first blast cut through Arbery's right wrist artery and pierced Arbery's chest, breaking ribs and causing massive internal bleeding. The second blast missed, and the third blast cut through a major artery and vein close to Arbery's left armpit, fracturing bones. The defence presented testimony on November 17 and 18, 2021. Travis McMichael was the only defendant to testify. Greg McMichael and Roddy did not testify. On the first day of his testimony, Travis testified that 1. Crime had increased in the neighbourhood in the months before the shooting, but he did not have complete information on who committed the crimes. 2. He was aware that items were stolen from the boat at his neighbour's under construction property and that he knew that, quote, several people, end quote, had entered the property, any of whom could have stolen the items. 3. 12 days before the shooting, he saw Arbery, quote, creeping, end quote, outside the under construction house, and he confronted Arbery, who reached towards his waistband, leading Travis to believe and call 911 because he was, quote, not going to chase or investigate somebody who might be armed, end quote. Remember that for later. On the day of the shooting, Gregory McMichael, in nearly a, quote, frantic state, told Travis, grab your gun. The guy who has just been breaking in down the road has just run past our house. And Travis suspected that Arbery had been caught, quote, breaking in or involved in an altercation. Travis McMichael also testified that when he and his father chased Arbery in Travis's vehicle, he caught up with Arbery and recognised him as the person he saw 12 days earlier. He mistakenly thought his father indicated that the police had been called by him. He chased Arbery to ask questions, with Travis asking, quote, "Hey, what you doing? What's going on?" End quote. However, Arbery did not reply. He continued chasing and attempted to, quote, de-escalate, end quote, by asking Arbery to, quote, stop. But Arbery looked, quote, very angry, end quote, turned around and ran in the opposite direction. He caught up with Arbery again, saying that, quote, police are on their way, end quote, causing Arbery to run faster. Hence, Travis became more suspicious. Travis also chased Arbery because he wanted to, quote, let the police know where Arbery was and watch what was going on to see where he's going, end quote. Travis McMichael further testified that he circled the neighbourhood to track Arbery, eventually seeing Arbery running beside a black truck, which Arbery was, quote, hitting and grabbing. Looked like he was trying to get in, end quote. Travis had not asked Roddy to join in the chase and, quote, didn't know where Roddy's black truck came from, end quote. Travis stopped his vehicle, got out, and then again asked his father if he had called the police, to which his father indicated he had no phone. He then saw Arbery running towards him, alone, viewed Arbery as, quote, dangerous, shouted at Arbery to stop, and reached for his shotgun from his vehicle, to which Arbery turned around and ran away. Regarding the final confrontation captured on video by Roddy, Travis McMichael testified that he saw Arbery once again running towards him, this time followed by the black truck, so Travis passed his handphone to his father, thinking that Arbery was going to attack. Travis pointed his shotgun at Arbery to deter him to not come at me. After that, Arbery ran around Travis's vehicle from the passenger side to the front, while Travis moved from the driver's side to the front. So he moved towards him to ensure that he could still see Arbery, thinking that, quote, might be armed, end quote, and that a threat to his dad. Arbery engaged Travis at the vehicle's front, grabbing Travis's gun and hitting Travis. So Travis shot Arbery to stop Arbery from taking Travis's gun. On the second day of testimony, Travis McMichael testified he never told Arbery that Arbery was under arrest for any crime because, quote, I didn't have time, I was still trying to get him to stop, end quote. That when making a statement to the police, Travis did not say that he and Greg were trying to arrest Arbery. That until the time Travis aimed his shotgun at Arbery, Arbery had not verbally threatened Travis or displayed any weapon, but Travis thought Arbery, quote, could be a threat, end quote, because Arbery was running at him. That Travis told police that day that he, quote, can't remember, end quote, if Arbery had grabbed Travis's gun when Travis shot him. But this account was inaccurate due to Travis suffering the, quote, most traumatic event of his life. Regarding Facebook posts Travis McMichael made before the shooting, he testified, In January 2019, he agreed with a neighbour who wrote that thieves should be made an example of. Quote, "That's right, hope you all catch the vermin." End quote. Then, when a neighbour indicated concern over how her father may interact with thieves because he did not care about being jailed, Travis responded, quote, "That's what this world needs more of. My old man is the same way. Hell, I'm getting that way." End quote. 6 residents of Satilla Shores testified on behalf of the defence, relaying their perception of crime in Satilla Shores, as well as the Facebook page on Satilla Shores in which crime was being discussed. Closing arguments were made from November 22nd, 2021. Prosecutor Linda Dunikowski argued that the defendants could not legally make a citizen's arrest of Arbery because they assumed he had committed a crime that day, whereas citizen's arrest required, quote, "immediate knowledge of a crime." She stated that the alternative requirement for a citizen's arrest, suspicion of fleeing after committing a felony, was not satisfied because at most Arbery had trespassed, which was a misdemeanor and not a felony. Linda further pointed out that Arbery had never brought a bag or any means to steal anything to the under construction house. She rejected the notion that the defendants were acting in self-defense, quote, "because they were initial unjustified aggressors," end quote, while noting that Travis had pointed his shotgun at Arbery. In contrast, she said Arbery had, quote, "no weapon, no threats, no way to call for help. He didn't even have a cell phone on him. Ran away from them for 5 minutes," end quote. Jason Sheffield, the lawyer for Travis McMichael, argued that under Georgia law, the felony of burglary included entering, quote, "with the intent to steal something," end quote. Thus, when Travis saw Arbery at the under construction house 12 days before the shooting, he had probable cause to believe Arbery committed burglary and could justifiably arrest Arbery. While describing the incident as tragic, Sheffield argued, quote, "You are allowed to defend yourself. You are allowed to use force that is likely to cause death or serious bodily injury if you believe it's necessary," end quote. Laura Hogue, a lawyer for Gregory McMichael, argued that, quote, "Arbery was not an innocent victim," end quote, describing him as, quote, "a reoccurring nighttime intruder, frightening and unsettling," end quote, that arrived in Satilla Shores, quote, "with no socks to cover his dirty, long toenails," end quote. That outraged everyone, even the media. She said Arbery was, quote, "acting erratically when approached and making terrible, unexpected, illogical choices," end quote. Failed to, quote, "stop or wait to tell the police what he was doing," end quote, and ultimately died because he, quote, "chose to fight without any sense of reason to run at a man wielding a shotgun," end quote. Kevin Goff, the lawyer for Roddy, argued that Roddy could not have known that the McMichaels had guns and would shoot Arbery, and that, quote, "by the time Roddy knew there was nothing he could do," end quote. Goff also questioned why Arbery never asked for someone to call 911, suggesting that, quote, Arbery doesn't want help, end quote. Goff argued that if the McMichaels were, quote, vigilantes and harboured some ill will toward Arbery, then what difference does it make whether Roddy was there or not, end quote. He concluded that Roddy's, quote, presence is absolutely superfluous, I can't say that word, and irrelevant to Arbery's death, end quote. Federal prosecution of the McMichaels and Brian. In April 2021, all three men were indicted by a federal grand jury with one count each of interference of rights, hate crime, and with one count each of attempted kidnapping. Travis McMichael and Gregory McMichael were also indicted with separate counts of using firearms during a crime of violence. They can use the hate crime. It's specifically claiming, quote, that the defendants used force and threats of force to intimidate and interfere with Arbery's right to use a public street because of his race, end quote. All three men pleaded not guilty. Okay, so now my interpretation of this case. I have been sat in a courtroom, and I remember when Linda Donikowski said she had the medical examiner on the stand, and she said, "Can you tell the jury what we're looking at here?" And I glanced up because obviously I diamond paint while I'm doing this, and I saw autopsy pictures of Ahmaud, and I cried. I have become really attached to this case, and this poor guy, 25 years old, and they're saying he's not from our neighbourhood, we don't know who he is, he's doing all these break-ins, and I'm fully aware it's their defence. In a court of law, they are trying to get off murder charges. I fully understand this. Ahmaud lived 1.3 miles away from the crime scene. He was from that neighbourhood, and he was an avid runner and jogger, and I mean he was fast. Just from the video clips that I have seen, I was like, whoa, he's just fast. He was just running, and these guys get in their truck and loaded with firearms. I mean, in the UK we don't have any of that. In America it seems like everyone must have a gun for protection. I'm not going to get into that, but in the UK we don't do any of that. But these guys got in their van and they were chasing this guy and running up and down streets, and he was turning his vehicle. If Arbery turned around and ran the other way, they turned their truck around and followed him and said, "Hey, we want to talk to you, just stop." And I'm thinking, who the hell do you think you are? If I was walking to the supermarket and some guy pulls up to me and starts saying, "Hey, what you doing?" I'm gonna be a bit defensive and a bit weirded out, and probably turn around and walk away. Ahmaud never said one word to these people in the whole time he was being hunted down. And then you have a car that's run you off the road, bashed you into a ditch, and I think the thumbprint was kind of where he was getting up more than trying to get into the car. But this is... I have grown very passionate about this, and I am pleased to tell you that the case ended, and it ended on Tuesday morning. I mean, obviously my timeline is different to Georgia, and I kept Googling what time is it in Georgia, and I'm like, it's 3 a.m, for goodness sake. They're all asleep, you know. So my timeline was very different. I'm watching it from 1:30 in the afternoon to like quite late at night. So they all rested their case on Tuesday morning, my time. So they had 6 hours and they hadn't reached a verdict. And I'm like, no, come on. Like, what are you debating? To be fair, I kind of wondered if they spent the first hour just going guilty, guilty, guilty with Travis. Because he clearly shot the gun. He clearly killed Ahmaud. Okay, so, yeah, guilty. Dad didn't shoot his gun, but he did encourage, chase down, shout at. So, where do you kind of lay it on all of those charges? Bearing in mind, there's 9 of them. And then, of course, you've got Roddy, who is assaulting Ahmaud with his vehicle. He did not shoot. He did not have a gun. I kind of think that's where they were deliberating for so long. However, I spent Wednesday refreshing my Google, and I'm pleased to tell you we have a verdict. Okay, so I am going to go through the charges and tell you how the jury found Travis McMichael. Count 1, malice murder, guilty. Maximum penalty, life without the possibility of parole. Count 2, felony murder, the offence being aggravated assault with a firearm, guilty. Felony murder, felony offence, aggravated assault with pickup trucks, guilty. Count 4, felony murder, felony offence, false imprisonment, guilty. Felony murder, felony offence, criminal attempt to commit a felony, guilty. Maximum penalty for any of the 4 charges, life without the possibility of parole. Count 6, aggravated assault with firearms, guilty. Count 7, aggravated assault with pickup trucks, guilty. Maximum penalty, 20 years. Count 8, false imprisonment, guilty. Maximum penalty, 10 years. Count 9, criminal attempt to commit a felony, guilty. Maximum penalty, 5 years. With Gregory McMichael. Count 1, malice murder, not guilty. Count 2, felony murder, felony offence, aggravated assault with a firearm, guilty. Count 3, felony murder, aggravated assault with pickup trucks, guilty. Count 4, felony murder, false imprisonment, guilty. Count 5, felony murder, criminal attempt to commit a felony, guilty. Maximum penalty for any of the 4 charges, life without the possibility of parole. Count 6, aggravated assault with firearms, guilty. Count 7, aggravated assault with pickup truck, guilty. Maximum 20 years. Count 8, false imprisonment, guilty. Maximum penalty 10 years. Count 9, a criminal attempt to commit a felony, guilty. Maximum penalty 5 years. Roddy. Count 1, malice murder, not guilty. Count 2, felony murder. Aggravated assault with a firearm, not guilty. Count 3, felony murder. Aggravated assault with pickup trucks, guilty. Count 4, felony murder. False imprisonment, guilty. Count 5, felony murder. Criminal attempt to commit a felony, guilty. Maximum penalty for any of the 4 charges, life without the possibility of parole. Count 6, aggravated assault with firearms, not guilty. Count 7, aggravated assault with pickup truck, guilty, 20 years. Count 8, false imprisonment, guilty, maximum penalty, 10 years. Count 9, criminal attempt to commit a felony, guilty, maximum penalty, 5 years. Rest in peace, Ahmaud Arbery. Justice has been served. I sobbed, absolutely sobbed, for justice being served. Thank you so much for joining me in today's episode. I apologise, I'm very emotional. Let me know your thoughts down below. As always, my thoughts and heart goes to Ahmaud's family. Rest in peace, and I shall see you very soon for another true crime episode. Thank you, fanatics, for joining me and keeping me company.